Hello, everyone. It is Aaron Farmer with mysugarfreejourney.com. How are you guys doing today? I hope you're all doing very well. We are going to do something a little different today. Rather than talk about a bunch of different things that are happening in the world of health, I'm just going to read you a story. Wouldn't that be nice? So, as I'm reading you the story, it's the story of Polyheme. Don't worry, you will in just a few minutes. I do want to thank Josh Walkos for bringing this to my attention. He did all of the work on it. Um, so as we're going through this, I'm doing this for a reason, because I want you to think about not Polyheme, but I want you to think about the COVID vaccine, everything that we've been through for the last 5 years. Because I mean, I know, like, just for me personally, as the more and more we learned about how little the COVID vaccine was tested, I thought, I mean, I know that these companies, they have to pursue the the they have to pursue the financial, the profit motive, but my goodness, you know, uh, were they really willing to put the health of an entire population, not just a nation, the entire world, at risk? So I want you to be thinking about that as we go through this story of Polyheme. So here is what we're going to look at. Let me pull it up here. In the 1980s, Illinois company Northfield Laboratories began developing Polyheme. Polyheme was an artificial blood substitute that promised to revolutionize battlefield medicine. What followed was one of the most shocking medical ethics violations in modern history, where hundreds of Americans became test subjects without their knowledge or consent. Polyheme was the Pentagon's dream, a shelf-stable, universal blood substitute that could save soldiers' lives in combat zones where real blood wasn't available. The Department of Defense was so interested, they provided funding to support its development, viewing it as a strategic military asset. Not, it's not as simple as, taking blood from one person and putting it in another. You've got to type it, you've got to match it, you got to know, what types of blood can go from one person to another. So if you just had one blood substitute where you didn't have to worry about the type of blood that was in the donor or the recipient, and you could just give it to someone who's bleeding out on the battlefield, you can imagine how that would be a huge, huge plus for the military. Let's continue on. But early trials revealed alarming dangers. In a 1998 to 2000 study of heart surgery patients, 10 out of 81 people who received Polyheme suffered heart attacks, and 2 died within a week. The control group, given real blood, had 0 such complications. It halted that study and has not published the full results. But Northfield chairman Stephen Gould said Polyheme didn't cause the heart attacks or disproportionately more deaths. He said the study was stopped because enrollment was declining and the company wanted to focus on trauma research. So it wasn't their product that was causing the heart attacks of the heart surgery patients. It was just, those people died and you can't really do anything about it. And don't look at the Polyheme. It's not the problem. So this guy, Stephen Gould, was working to protect the profits of his company. Here's where it gets sinister. He halted the trial and chose not to publish the full internal FDA memo called cardiac outcomes alarming. Yet regulators, mindful of Pentagon interest, allowed development to continue. So they were allowed to not have to publish the study that they did that showed that if people got the Polyheme instead of regular blood, that they had more heart attacks and cardiovascular events than if they got actual blood. This is one of the problems with the scientific method that we've got with the scientific, not method, but the scientific, universe, I guess, that we've got set up, is that companies, that if you start a scientific project, if you start the research to do a paper, you're not forced to you're not forced to publish the results. So if you do the study and you don't like the results, you can just not publish. Or you can do 10 studies, find 2 of the studies that give you the results that you want, and just publish the 2 and not publish the 8 that gave you the bad results. It's a problem. It's one of the things that needs to be fixed in our scientific community. It's bad enough that most of the people that do the peer review are bought and paid for by the pharmaceutical companies. But when the pharmaceutical companies can pick and choose what studies they publish, you've got a whole other realm of problems and ways that the pharmaceutical companies can hide their issues. To test polyheme on trauma patients, Northfield excluded from informed consent. This regulation allows in emergencies without their consent, especially suspending a core tenet of religious ethics. So if you're unable to give consent, you can have an experiment performed on you without your consent, and it's not that big a deal because you weren't able to give consent. Crazy. So the EFIC loophole worked like this. Northfield held token public meetings with predictably low turnout, distributed opt-out bracelets, then assumed everyone else consented to be a test subject. So I live in Arlington, Texas. If they had done this in Arlington, what they would do is they would give some meeting at the Hotel 6 down the road. They would invite the entire city of Arlington, Texas. And if you went there, you listened to what they had to say, you could get an opt-out bracelet. And so if you needed medical attention, they saw the opt-out bracelet, you would not be enrolled in the study. But if you're like the 99.999% of people who didn't bother coming, you were assumed to be opted into the study. You can see how that would be a little problematic. A senior, what in the world? Sorry, my thing's jumping around here. All right. Goodness gracious. I'm sorry. Give me just a minute. This may be pig. From 2004 to 2006, the no consent trial rolled out across 27 cities and 23 hospitals. Major sites included San Diego, Denver, Chicago, Detroit, Kansas City, and others. Any adult trauma patient in these areas could be enrolled without knowing it in advance. So any trauma patient in these 23 cities or 27 cities or 23 cities, 27 hospitals could be enrolled in this blood transfusion product test without their consent. And what happened? Whatever happened, happened. So here's how it worked. Paramedics carried coolers of polyheme alongside standard IV fluids. For severely injured patients, they'd open a sealed envelope at random. Polyheme meant immediate infusion of the experimental substitute. Saline met standard protocol. So you couldn't consent, and whether or not you got the standard protocol or this new experimental protocol was totally up to the winds of fate. Not good. The most disturbing part, even at hospitals, polyheme patients continued receiving the artificial blood for up to 12 hours before getting real blood. This meant deliberately withholding proven therapy from injured people without consent. Of the general public had never heard of the trial and opt-out patient bracelets. Everything changed on February 22nd, 2006, when the Wall Street Journal published, quote, "Amid alarm bells, a blood substitute keeps pumping." exposing the hidden heart attack data from the earlier trial. The medical ethics community erupted in outrage. Within days of the Wall Street Journal expose, Utah hospitals suspended their participation. CBS News ran ethics blast synthetic blood test. Senator Grassley fired off a scathing letter to the FDA, calling the situation outrageous and disturbing. And he was right. Grassley's letter captured the absurdity perfectly. No reasonable person would expect to be treated as an experimental subject without consent. Yet the FDA had created a system where Americans had to wear "I decline the Polyheme" wristbands to avoid involuntary enrollment. And, I'm sure we'd never find this out, but I actually wonder if any of the people who got, the small percentage of people who got the wristbands were ever put into a position where they could have got the Polyheme. I bet there was almost no overlap, just because the numbers were so low. Throughout the controversy, Northfield CEO Dr. Stephen Gould doubled down, insisting there was no attempt at secrecy and that Polyheme didn't cause the heart attacks. The profit motive was clear. After the Tribune said it all. Blood substitute, a disaster in trial. 46 of the 349 Polyheme patients died, which is about 13.2%, and 35 of the 363 control patients died. That's 9.6%. So 11 more deaths in the experimental group. So you were more likely to die if you got the Polyheme than if you got just normal blood. The data showed Polyheme provided no survival benefit, didn't significantly reduce blood usage, and was associated with more medical complications, including heart attacks. Hundreds of people have been exposed to an experimental product without consent for nothing. And you got to wonder, there's a reason we use, and I know that a lot of people are against this, but there's a reason why we use animals to do these tests at like stage 3 before you actually put it on humans. And you telling me that putting this Polyheme in monkeys or rats or something didn't cause them more heart attacks? I find that hard to believe. You would think that they would have found these problems out long before they got to human beings. What do I know, though? Northfield stock plummeted 70%. Shareholders sued for securities fraud. A 2008 meta-analysis in JAMA found hemoglobin-based blood substitutes showed increased mortality and heart attacks across the board. The Pentagon's miracle cure was actually a killer. April 2009, the FDA definitively rejected Polyheme. The Pentagon raises disturbing questions about how military priorities influence civilian medical research. Defense officials were eager to see if Polyheme could keep soldiers alive, and this urgency arguably permeated the trial's approval process. The FDA tightened EFIC guidelines after 2006, but the loophole remains. So that loophole still exists. That's nuts. Some analysts call for revisiting these regulations entirely, worried that the Polyheme trial exploited loopholes in ways regulators never envisioned. The scandal exemplifies what bioethicist Dr. Robert Nelson noted, quote, "Just because you can do research without consent doesn't always mean you should," which seems like a very wise saying. The exception from informed consent rule was meant for genuine emergencies, not corporate profit schemes. This is a great overview with extensive references, and there's a link. And if you go click on the link that I've put in the thing down below, you can go find out more. In closing, the Polyheme trials were evil because they knowingly exposed unwitting American citizens to a dangerous experimental blood substitute without their informed consent. exploiting a legal loophole by bypassing result. More people died in the experimental group, and no one was held accountable. It was a grotesque fusion of corporate greed, government complicity, and medical betrayal. Story matters because it shows how easily our rights can be suspended in the name of innovation and national security. And it is very difficult, extremely difficult to, um, oops, so this is a problem with the audio. It is extremely difficult to read that story and not see a parallel between Polyheme and the COVID vaccines. I'm about halfway through, and I don't know that I'm going to finish it because it's a very depressing book. But Naomi Wolf's book, oh gosh, what is her book? The Pfizer. Gosh,
some comment. They're like, why isn't your account huge?
Sorry, the Pfizer Papers. Is that what the name? Yeah, the Pfizer Papers. By yeah, I've still got 5 hours left. I don't know that I'm gonna finish it. Like I said, it's a very depressing book. But what that book goes through, it goes through the. You remember those papers that Pfizer didn't want released to the public until like 65 years problems that were happening with the that were going to happen with the COVID vaccine. They knew going to die. They knew that it was going to cause a drop in fertility for both men and women. They knew that it was probably going to increase the rates of cancer. They did the studies. They saw the numbers. They saw everything that was going to happen as a result of these COVID vaccines, and still pushed it out onto the public. And that part of it, as much as I don't like it, that part of it, I expect companies to do everything they can to make money as quickly as they can. I almost expect, especially when it comes to big pharma, I almost expect big pharma to be doing everything in their power to extract as much money out of us as possible. But what's unforgivable, what is absolutely unforgivable about everything that happened at that time were the mandates. So many people were forced to get that vaccine in order to keep their job, and that that is unexcusable. Everything that we're seeing today about the COVID vaccine, very beginning, exactly what was going to happen. Um, and I would challenge you to read that and challenge you to see what these people were doing behind the scenes to not to make us healthier. Although it could be argued that if you were one of these people who were extremely old and had multiple comorbidities, you should have gotten the vaccine. I don't have any problem with people that were already struggling with their health. There were people that COVID, put you at risk of dying. And if that was you, go get the vaccine. I don't have any problem with those people getting the vaccine. But man, the people that were forced to get it to keep their jobs, the kids that were forced to get it to go to college or go to high school, or I mean, there were studies. I mean, there was kids like 3 and 4 year olds that had to get the vaccine in order to go to preschool, um, or they had to wear a mask all day. Which the pharmaceutical companies that we were put through that. Man, it sucks that we were put through that. But We were, and now maybe next time we'll know. Maybe next time we'll see, and we'll we'll be clear eyed about uh, the fact that pharmaceutical companies don't always have our best interest at heart, and our government doesn't always have our best interest at heart, and that we need to make sure that we understand the risks and not allow them to force us to do things where we don't understand the risk. If you study the risk and you make a free will decision to take on that risk because you think the benefits outweigh the risk, great. I don't have any problem with that. My parents got the vaccine. They're a little older. They're 75, 70, between 70 and 75. They were a little older. They were concerned about the vaccine and what it would. They were concerned about COVID rather and what it would do to them. They got the vaccine, but they looked at it. They looked at the risks. And that's what they decided. I don't have any. We didn't need the. I've got a 96-year-old woman that lives right on the other side of this wall. My mother-in-law. She lives right there, and she got COVID in early 2021, and we were very concerned. But at the time she was 21, so at the time she was 93. So she got COVID as a 93-year-old. Um, I think I did the math wrong there, but 92-year-old. So at 92, no, yeah, 93. That's right. She was born in 28 and happened in 21, right? Uh, I don't know. That sounds right. But she got COVID, and she said that whatever was going to happen was going to happen in that room. She didn't want to go to the hospital. They brought her an oxygen mask, and it took her about 2 or 3 weeks to get over it, but she got over it just fine. She got COVID again 6 or 8 months later, and she kicked it again. And then she had a healthcare professional come in and check up on her and want to give her the vaccine. And I thought, that's so crazy. She's 93 years old. I know for a fact that that vaccine was not studied on a single 93-year-old woman. How would you know how that vaccine was going to affect a 93-year-old woman? No 93-year-old woman got the vaccine in a study somewhere. You wouldn't give the vaccine to a 93-year-old person because you wouldn't know if they died, if it was from the vaccine or if it was just because 93-year-old people die. That's what happened to Hank Aaron. If you remember that, remember Hank Aaron got his vaccine and it was a big deal, and then he died like 2 weeks later. Um, and people were saying, "Oh, old people they die." Well, yeah, they do, but they sure do seem to die a lot faster once they once they get that vaccine in them. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that story. Again, that was Polyheme. I put a link to the breakdown in the about section of this video. You can check it out, whether it's on Twitter or YouTube. This is, I believe, going to both Twitter and YouTube. If you have any questions, reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Appreciate you guys listening. And we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.